Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live broadcast, More Than Data, a new generation of image sensors and signal processing, presented by Rachit Mohindra, Product Manager for Life Science Research Cameras and Photometrics. We are excited to bring you this educational web seminar presented by LabRoots and sponsored by Photometrics, a company that designs and manufactures high-performance cameras for life science research. For those of you who may not be aware, Photometrics is the original architect of the world's first scientific-grade microscopy EMCCD camera. Today, the company continues to lead the industry with its state-of-the-art scientific imaging instrumentation, which leverages a wide range of sensor technologies. Every day, researchers from around the globe rely on these cutting-edge solutions to accomplish their most demanding imaging requirements. To learn more about Photometrics and its products, you can visit their website at www.photometrics.com. I am Judy O'Rourke of LabRoots, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that this event is interactive. We encourage you to participate by submitting as many questions as you want at any time you want during the presentation. Just click on the green Q&A button located in the lower left of the presentation window and type your question into the box that appears on the screen. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation. Also, please notice that you will be viewing the presentation in the slide window. To enlarge the window, just click on the screen icon located on the lower right. This webinar has been approved for continuing educational credits. Please click on the CE button at the bottom left corner and follow the process to receive your credits. And finally, if you have trouble seeing or hearing the presentation, please click on the support button at the top right of the presentation window or use the Q&A button to let us know that you're having a problem. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Rachit Mohindra as the Product Manager for Life Science Research Cameras at Photometrics. Rachit has been intimately involved with the EMCCD revolution that was instrumental in the development of new methods in single molecule detection and super resolution microscopy. His experience in managing the design intricacies of CCD, CMOS, and EMCCD cameras has given him a unique perspective on emerging light detection technologies and their expected impact on life science microscopy. Please join me in welcoming Rachit Mohindra. I will now turn the presentation over to him.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Thank you for joining us. We see that we've got quite a few people on here. People from industry, some competitors, users, good spread of what we'd like to see. But this webinar, it's about the next generation of image sensors and signal processing and how that can be applied to life sciences and microscopy. And so the types of image sensors that we typically place into our cameras, especially when considering that we're designing for very low light applications, there have been CCDs, the charge coupled device. They've been around since, I'd say, the mid-1970s, and they've been the workhorse for digital imaging for the last 20 years or so. And in the situations where CCDs just haven't been sensitive enough or haven't been fast enough, there was a variation developed right around 2000, 2001, I'd say, called the EMCCD, the Electron Multiplying CCD. What this did was it took signal that you'd measured, multiplied it up above the noise, gave you way more sensitivity that you could work with. And the last technology that gets used are CMOS sensors. These are basically integrated circuits that are sensitive to light that offer a pretty decent advantage compared to some of the other technologies. And to sort of go through how these technologies have been used in the past, through 2010, CCDs were the preferred imaging technology. And this is definitely reflected by most of the cameras that were available at the time. I think Photometrics itself at the time had, I think, 5 or 6 different versions of CCD cameras. And the reason for this was simply they gave you good resolution, they gave you good sensitivity, they gave you good frame rate. The sort of trade-off that you typically experienced, unfortunately, was that you could pick 2 of those 3. And typically it came down to resolution and sensitivity because that's what CCDs were very good at. When it came to frame rate, you sort of came up against a wall. The faster you went, you would either have to trade off in the number of pixels or your resolution, or the amount of noise you ended up in your images. The faster you went, the noisier your images were. But in general, they provided enough imaging versatility for a large variety of applications, ranging from fixed cell fluorescence out to some of the different live cell applications that you could expect. But when CCDs weren't enough, as I'd mentioned, the EMCCD became the other option. And that's mostly because they were way more sensitive and they provided a much higher frame rate. They were 9 times more sensitive, the near perfect conversion of photons, sensitivity for imaging single molecule fluorescence. And by having higher frame rates, I think CCDs at the time were somewhere around 11 to 12 frames per second. EMCCD cameras offered frame rates that were 3 to 6 times faster. At the time, EM cameras were at about 30 frames a second. For the last few years, they've been up to about 60 or 70 frames a second. And so EMCCD cameras were able to provide that level of performance that CCDs weren't able to quite get you. And so between both of these technologies, you were able to cover the gamut of your requirements for the different applications. And by being able to provide this level of sensitivity and frame rate and speed, it enabled the development of new techniques, new applications. The Nobel Prize was just awarded out for super resolution microscopy, and that was primarily developed and accomplished using EMCCD cameras. Now, no technology is perfect, and with EMCCD cameras, the trade-off for that higher level of sensitivity, that frame rate, was that you ended up with a bit more noise in your images. The electron multiplication process, the process that you use to reduce the effects of the read noise that allows you to image those very dim samples, the single molecule fluorescence, it's a stochastic multiplication process. And so it adds an additional statistical variance in how much noise is in your image, which affects it makes your fluorescent measurements less precise. While you're able to see things, the noise in your images are larger, less precision in your data. And this affected your signal-to-noise ratio. And typically when it came down to CCDs or EMCCDs as the decision-making factor, it came down to applications, and people typically had to choose between those two, till about 2010, when CMOS technology arrives, and for the most part replaces CCD technology. As I'd mentioned earlier, CCDs made you typically pick between speed, resolution, and sensitivity. You got 2 of the 3. CMOS made it simple. You got everything. It was 3 times larger, 10 times faster, 5 times less noise. And what it allowed you to do was really bridge the gap between where CCDs and EMCCD cameras and sensors were in terms of performance. And so if we take a comparison look, this is a standardized fluorescence slide that can be used for intensity calibration. What we have on the top is a CCD camera, the CoolSnap EZ, at a relatively low light level. It's about a 10 millisecond acquisition. And underneath it, we have an CMOS camera that happens to be the PHOTOMETRICS Prime. And as you can clearly tell that at these lower light levels, the lower read noise, the higher sensitivity clearly makes a difference. And you're able to get better signal-to-noise ratios, get better precision in your measurements. You're able to get better quality data. And as a proof that it brought you closer to where EMCCDs were, if you compare that same CMOS image at the bottom to an EMCCD at the top, you'll see it's actually really close. Yes, the signal levels are higher on the EM camera, and they always will be. EMCCD cameras will always be more sensitive than the CMOS, but it's quite comparable. And so when it comes to applications, there are quite a few criteria that you need to consider. Typically, depending on your objective, the magnification, the NA, the pixel size of your sensor, there are some trade-offs and experimental parameters that you have to take into consideration. EMCCD cameras have quite large pixels. This is one of the reasons why they're so sensitive. These large pixels allow you to measure much more light per pixel, and so what you trade off in spatial information, you gain in being able to measure much lower levels of signal. But a larger pixel typically requires a higher level of magnification to be able to achieve what is a proper sampling rate, or what's called the Nyquist frequency for sampling. This basically just means you really want to have 2 pixels per resolution cell, so you can maximize your spatial information without undersampling, so you know when a feature begins and ends effectively. But with this larger pixel that requires the higher magnification, there's trade-offs. Higher magnification means that your overall field of view, the area that you're able to image, is smaller. And because of the higher magnification, the amount of light you have, the photon flux, is now spread over a wider area. And so you effectively get less light per pixel. And so while trying to balance these parameters, it can become quite challenging, and especially when you have those large pixels that you have to balance out. And so primarily for that reason, because SCMOS performance is so close to where the EMCCD is, many users, many researchers have tried to push SCMOS technology to where EMCCD cameras currently are. One of the parameters, or if you look at this just triangle here, what this basically emphasizes is that SCMOS cameras gave you, speed and resolution, and they gave you decent sensitivity. But when you're imaging at higher magnifications or very dim samples, the sensitivity becomes absolutely critical. The first challenge in microscopy is, can I see it? And then the second consideration is, how well can I see it? And SCMOS cameras, they didn't, while close to EM cameras, they didn't always do as well. And so if you look at a comparison here, what we have is the SCMOS camera, the PHOTOMETRICS Prime, at a 100x magnification, definitely oversampling spatially here, compared to the EMCCD at a 150x magnification. Now, the reason for that is, again, to adequately sample an EM camera with the 16 micron by 16 micron pixel requires a much higher level of magnification to appropriately spatially sample. And so when you get that comparison, yes, you've traded off in field of view and the amount of light per pixel, but just having that level of sensitivity and effectively appropriate pixel size with the difference in magnification, the EMCCD camera still gives you a better signal-to-noise performance, or better signal-to-background, as you can see. There's better contrast, and the reason for this really is the EM gain, the ability for the EMCCD sensor to maximize the amount of signal you're able to detect by amplifying the light above the noise. As that little diagram shows, what EM gain does is multiply your signal up above the level of noise there, making it detectable. Typically, you'll hear us say, us camera people will be like, yeah, you're reducing the noise to less than an electron. It's a proportional reduction, but how the camera or the sensor itself physically works is by amplifying the signal well above the noise. And so there's no way to do this with an SCMOS sensor. There are no EMCMOS cameras around at this time. And so one way to maximize what your signal-to-noise ratio is, or the image quality that you can achieve with an CMOS camera, is actually through image processing. While you're not necessarily able to increase your overall level of signal per frame, like you can with an EMCCD, what you can do is leverage the information that's available in the image itself to try and minimize the noise that might be present. And by doing that, what you're effectively doing is maximizing what your signal-to-noise ratio would be, the ability to discern what is actual signal and reducing the noise, while not in the same way as EMCCD cameras, but to achieve similar results. And so it's possible to do this active noise reduction. If you think about how our eyes behave, when we're running a focus loop with a camera and we're looking at a feature, there are times where our eyes they're great at removing the noise from the image. And this is quite actually easily seen when you're looking at a cell. You draw a line profile across some of the features, some of the filaments within, and you're able to see the structures but not necessarily measure them. That's because our eyes are able to filter out effectively that high frequency noise. And so by leveraging the ability of our eyes to detect these patterns and structures in the image, we can leverage that and put that on the camera itself to get this noise reduction in real time effectively and achieve levels of denoising or increase in signal-to-noise ratio by factors of 3 to 5x. And that's a pretty significant increase in terms of image quality. Now, there's always concerns that come up, especially when image processing becomes a part of the conversation. People are always concerned, what are you doing to my data? Are you introducing any artifacts? They don't want it to necessarily be a black box. Image data goes in, something comes out that's better. And so if you have a quantitative algorithm that maintains the finer features, and is published actually, so it's definitely not a black box. This publication that literally says denoising fluorescence microscopy image sequences, an algorithm that's designed specifically for microscopy to give you this increase in signal-to-noise ratio, demonstrates a increased clarity and better data image processing algorithm. And so in these images that you see here, on the left we have a 100 millisecond exposure that we took with one of our cameras, and what you can see the structures, the filaments behind that line profile. But when you look at the data coming off that line profile itself, you can see maybe some of the peaks and valleys, but you sort of run into a little bit of noise. If I try and use this arrow function, let's see. So you can see that peak, you can see that valley, you can maybe see this one, but let's see, I can highlight stuff. In this area, you're sort of losing out. And so when you turn on the denoising feature, what you get is clarity in that same region. It's not about amplifying the signal, it's about reducing the noise that's present in the image. And what that allows you to do is not change the intensities. It's not about changing the data there. It's about removing the uncertainty. It's about maximizing that precision. And what that allows you to do is really really measure the difference. It's not just visually seeing it, but being able to measure what those peaks and valleys are. And just as I didn't mention this, but those are the same exposures, one with the feature off, one with the feature on, and you can clearly see that you're getting better signal to noise. Now, signal to noise is measured differently by everyone. Some people do signal to background, some people signal to standard. Well, how does this affect people experimentally? That's what people always really want to know. This is all nice, but how will this affect my imaging, my experiments? What this denoising functionality allows you to do is effectively get the quality of data as if you had 8 to 10 times more light. And so what you'll see in these graphs here, the first graph is again, I think it's a 100 millisecond exposure. You see the line profile on the cell to the left. Now the peaks and valleys, they're decently visible. If we take 8 times more light and 8 times longer exposure time, so if we go from 100 milliseconds to 800 milliseconds, as you would expect, the quality of that data gets better. You know, the peaks and valleys are more well defined. There's less variation along that curve. You're getting better quality data out of it. But there's trade-offs too. 800 millisecond means 8 times more light, more phototoxicity, more photobleaching. Your cells are less happy. And the challenge is typically not the imaging, but keeping your cells alive long enough to be able to get the answers or the information you need. So anytime you're able to reduce that, you know, keep your cells happy for longer, the better your results will be. And so what the denoising algorithm allows you to do is get the quality of data that's equivalent to 8 to 10 times more light. So if you look at that last graph along the bottom, that's the same 100 millisecond exposure with the denoising functionality, and you get arguably a better line profile through the sample than 8 times more light. And so by being able to really reduce that light and, you know, extended exposures or extended experiments become much more possible now. How does this perform on an SCMOS camera? You would get some performance that looks like that. On the left there is the original SCMOS acquisition, and on the right is the denoised acquisition. You can see that the noise in the background, the variations there are clearly removed. Some of those features are now visible within that neuron there. And so how does this compare to EM cameras, right? That's one of the reasons why this denoising algorithm becomes important, because SCMOS cameras are continuously being pushed towards the level of performance or the applications where EMCCD cameras are used. And so if we do that comparison, on the left is the EMCCD camera, on the right is the same denoised image stack from the SCMOS camera. You can see that they become much more comparable. You're able to reduce the noise in the SCMOS image to really bring out the intensities that are actually present, and they're actually quite comparable, especially to EMCCD cameras. Now, processing will always be an option, but the real question is, why can't SCMOS physically itself be as sensitive as EMCCD cameras? Or why are EMCCDs more sensitive? Now, one of the key features, or the key, I guess, differences between the two types of technologies is how the pixels collect light. The SCMOS sensor uses microlenses on top of the pixel to direct light to the light-sensitive area, effectively. It's front illuminated, and so what this means is that in front of the light-sensitive area are all the wires that allow you to do the readout to transfer the image data to the computer. The reason for the microlenses is to get the light past those wires, to get the light to that light-sensitive area. And so it's based off of this that the effective QE or quantum efficiency of CMOS devices is around 70 to 80%. The way that Sony did it in the past, Sony probably has the most advanced microlensing technology out there. And they were able to achieve about 75% with their CCDs. CMOS devices today claim about 80%. It's about the high end there. Somewhere between 75 and 80% is the best you're able to get. The way that EMCCDs do it is they just move the microlenses and the wires out of the way. They get rid of the microlenses and they effectively flip the sensor upside down, or the light sensitive area upside down. It's called backside illumination, but by effect, they thin the sensor down, so now the light sensitive area sits just above the wires, and so there's no objects in the way, there's no wiring, there's no lens trickery to get your light to the light sensitive area. And this way you're able to truly maximize what your overall sensitivity can be. That's how EMCCD cameras can get to that 90–95% level of sensitivity. And so I guess the natural question from that comes to be, well, why haven't we done this on CMOS devices? And it's not a unique question. It's a question that's been tried and attempted over the years. It has to be. It's, as I said, not unique, but it's difficult. But it's now available. There is a backside illuminated CMOS sensor available. And what it demonstrates is that, yes, it is possible to get to a near perfect 95% quantum efficiency across the visible range there. And so when you compare it to the 82% sensitivity, you see that it's better all the way across. And it can be easy to simulate these curves, but if you do a comparison between the two technologies, if you look at a 82% SCMOS camera compared to a back-illuminated CMOS, what we have here is it's a 30 millisecond exposure. And I think we're looking at some mouse hippocampal neurons. They're expressing M-Ruby, and what we're looking at is the development of these dendritic spines. And these neurons are actually extremely photobleaching, phototoxicity sensitive. When one of them dies or bleaches, they all die and bleach. And so it becomes quite challenging, especially when you need to use much lower levels of light to be able to detect these. And so here we see a 30 millisecond exposure comparing a front illuminated 80% scientific CMOS to a 95% back illuminated CMOS. And you can clearly tell that the signal levels, the background is much better on the back illuminated CMOS. Now, if you go to higher levels of light, if that's always an option or something that you're able to do with your samples, then the performance does get a little bit closer. But the 95% camera still, because of its sensitivity, will give you better signal to noise overall. And we just happened to do a side-by-side comparison between the two cameras at different exposure times. And so it comes out that the back-illuminated camera, with its quantum efficiency and slightly larger pixels, is actually about 3 times more sensitive than current CMOS technology. The other part of this that we've noticed with this differing technology, by being able to run the sensor through a different process to be able to get the back thinning and the pixel structure and the sensor working, the noise performance has actually improved quite a bit too. If we take those same image stacks, I believe these are the 30 millisecond acquisitions, and you average them together, you're able to see this pattern noise in the background of the front illuminated CMOS sensor. The way that the sensors are structured, all CMOS cameras have these columns that allow you to digitize. It allows you to read out your data in parallel, and that's how you're able to get some of these higher frame rates at very low noise. But all of these columns have some variability in gain and offset and other sort of peculiar features that need to be corrected, and by all camera manufacturers. And one of the consistent complaints that does come up when using CMOS technology is that this pattern becomes visible, either with averaging or at specific light levels. Not exactly sure why, but this process with the back thin sensor, however the pixel is designed and the structure behind it, gives you very clean images. I actually scaled this image much more aggressively than I did the front illuminated CMOS, and I don't really see any pattern in the background. what people have always seemed to request is CCD-like image quality from a CMOS sensor, and this newer technology seems to deliver that. Now, we expect a back-illuminated CMOS camera to be more sensitive than a front-illuminated CMOS camera. How does that compare? How does the back-illuminated sensor compare to an EMCCD, though? Because again, remember, as CMOS sensors have been pushed more and more into the applications of where EMCCD cameras sat. But you know that if you look at, remember that misshapen triangle, the sensitivity hasn't always been there, and that's what this camera begins to offer, or what this sensor begins to offer. When you compare the 95% back-illuminated CMOS sensor to the 1K EMCCD cameras that are available, you'll see very similar levels of sensitivity. Using that same standardized fluorescence slide, you're able to detect effectively the same number of bars between both cameras. And this is using, you know, a standardized fluorescence slide, but in actual applications, when comparing an EMCCD at the 150x magnification to the back-illuminated CMOS, you're actually getting better image quality from the CMOS camera. And if you look closely in these images, the pixel-to-pixel variation, that excess noise that happens due to the multiplication process, is actually quite visible in the image with the EMCCD. And you get a much cleaner, much flatter background when using the back-illuminated CMOS. And so mathematically, how does the signal-to-noise of these images work out? The back-illuminated CMOS, because you don't have the excess noise, because you're able to measure the 95% of signal available, you're able to get a much higher signal-to-noise ratio when compared to both available front-illuminated CMOS products that are out there on the market, and when compared to EMCCDs as well. And so this becomes a much more viable option as you move CMOS technology towards the more demanding, the applications that require that level of sensitivity. And so the additional advantage you get, because the pixels on the CMOS sensor are smaller, you don't need the 150x magnification to appropriately sample with an EMCCD camera. And as we'd mentioned earlier, there's trade-offs with higher levels of magnification. So with the lower magnification, you're actually getting significantly larger fields of view, 2.2 times larger than the 1K EMCCD cameras, almost 6 times larger than the 512 EMCCD cameras. You're getting somewhere between 6 to 60% more light per pixel because of this use of lower magnification. And so you're truly able to maximize the sensitivity and take CMOS to the levels of performance where EMCCD sat before. And you're able to do this with all the advantages that CMOS sensors typically provide. The large field of view, the really high frame rates, the noise of around an electron, extremely high dynamic range. EM cameras are typically somewhere between 9 and 10 bits of actual dynamic range, even though cameras they report 16-bit data. Actual experimental dynamic range they could offer is 10 to 12 bits. And with these sensors, you're able to get almost usable, proper 16-bit dynamic range, being able to measure 60,000 different individual levels of light. And so if you sort of take all of these different technologies that we ran through today and consider where they would fall out in terms of the different applications, because CCDs are the workhorse, they offer good sensitivity, good resolution, there's still a spot for them. There's still a place for them in the market today. And it's typically for high to medium light levels with not so high magnification, because you get very good spatial resolution, you get very good quality images out of it, and it's great for fixed cell fluorescence or photo documentation. But not so good for dynamic events, live cell imaging, time-lapse, because as I'd mentioned, the frame rate is where CCDs didn't quite do so well. And that's where the scientific CMOS devices come in. The pixel size and the levels of sensitivity that you get from an CMOS device actually makes it very ideal for a 60x objective. You're able to appropriately spatially sample. You have more light per pixel because you're not magnifying as much. It's great for the live cell applications or light sheet microscopy, where people are typically using 60x objectives and trying to maximize the spatial resolution in your images. Where the back-illuminated CMOS comes in is where EMCCDs used to be. In the extremely low light flux, the very demanding applications, single molecule fluorescence, super resolution, and other applications such as the spinning disk confocal, where the confocality blocks a lot of the light that you would otherwise have imaged, or turf microscopy. And what back-illuminated CMOS technology allows you to do is maintain those same levels of sensitivity as you would have previously achieved with an EMCCD camera, but do it with better spatial resolution, a larger field of view. It provides significant advantages. And it's not like EMCCDs are now defunct. It's not that they've been completely replaced and now are ancient technology. EMCCD cameras will always be the most sensitive cameras out there. The giant pixels, the near perfect quantum efficiency, read noise of less than an electron. If again, remember, if the first problem is I can't see my cell and the back-illuminated CMOS isn't quite enough, then an EMCCD will always be a viable option. But for the majority of applications, where light flux is quite low, back-illuminated CMOS becomes a much more viable option. There's no need to try and shoehorn the smaller pixel front-illuminated CMOS technology into where the EMCCD cameras previously were positioned. And so the reason we're talking about the back-illuminated CMOS is Photometrix has a camera, the Prime 95B, and this camera, it effectively combines the advantages of EMCCD and CMOS. You get the EMCCD levels of sensitivity, you get the dynamic range, noise, frame rates of CMOS technology, and you're 3 times more sensitive than previous or current existing CMOS cameras, and you're able to get the same level of sensitivity as EMCCD cameras with better signal-to-noise ratio. So I guess with that, taking you through that, I'd like to thank you for attending, and if we should go through some of the questions that have been asked.
Thank you, Rachit, for that informative presentation. It's time for Q&A. If you have a question you'd like to ask Rachit, please do so now. Just click on the green Q&A button at the lower left of the presentation window, type your question into the box that appears on your screen, and click on the send button. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for. So let's get started. Our first question is, how about deconvolution of image stacks from 95% back illuminated? Where do we get in terms of resolution? And just let me know if you need me to repeat that question.
Yes, if you could, please.
Sure. How about deconvolution of image stacks from 95% back illuminated? Where do we get in terms of resolution?
While we haven't run the camera through a deconvolutions yet, the better the data going in is typically the better data coming out. And so I would expect deconvolution image stacks with the 95B to be of very, very good and very high quality. You don't have the variation and excess noise that you would have with EMCCDs, and you have the same level of performance that you're getting with current front illuminated sensors in terms of noise, and so which have been used for deconvolution. So I would think that your results would be quite good.
Can the denoising algorithms be used on EMCCDs?
Yes, the denoising algorithms can be used on EMCCDs. One of the limiting factors actually is the number of pixels on a sensor. So for example, because we're looking for structure and similarity in an image, the less the spatial information there is, the less that you're able to reduce the noise. But there are implementations that can use 3D images of stacks to minimize that noise on EMCCDs. Now, you're not necessarily removing the excess noise from the measurements, but you are removing you are reducing the effects of the image or the noise in the image.
Does the prime 95% back illuminated have enhanced function too?
I would keep your ear out for that actually. At this time it does not, but being based on the prime platform of cameras from Photometrics, it's definitely something to keep an eye out for in the future.
Is the denoise algorithm free?
So currently the denoising algorithm is available on one of the Photometrics cameras, the Photometrics Prime. There are publications out there that talk about and discuss and explain how the algorithm works, but to get access to the algorithm, you actually have to go to the Curie Institute in France and request a license to be able to get access to the algorithm.
What is the pixel count, the resolution, and highest full frame rate of the prime 95% back illuminated? And also, what is the pixel size?
So the Prime 95B is a 1200 by 1200 sensor, so 1.44 megapixel. And it has two gain modes. There's a 16-bit mode where you get 41 frames per second, and a high gain 12-bit mode where you get 81 frames per second. The pixel size of the camera is 11 by 11 microns, so 121 microns squared.
When is the BMI CMOS camera available?
The camera is available now. You can go to our website and request demos, and our sales reps will be in contact with you and can come out and show you the camera.
And is denoising done in the camera or on the computer?
The denoising is actually done on the camera itself. Our implementation on camera is done on the camera head. There's an embedded signal processing engine that we've placed on the camera to give you this data in real time. And the reason for that is being able to get this data in real time and not having to go post-process and take the time to transfer all of that data, it allows you to get better results immediately.
Are you suggesting that we switch our EMCCD out for a BSI CMOS? Is it worth making the change?
I think for the most part, as you move forward, the back-illuminated CMOS becomes a more versatile option, but it doesn't mean that EMCCDs are now defunct. They still offer great levels of sensitivity and great frame rates. Just as technology develops, you're able to add more functionality and better performance as technology progresses, and that's what the back-illuminated CMOS represents.
What image acquisition software can be used with the Prime 95B? Metamorph, Micromanager, can the denoising algorithm be turned on or off?
Currently, for the 95B, the camera will be supported in Micromanager. We are working to support in other software packages. And yes, the denoising algorithm can be turned on or off at your discretion.
Can the Primer 95B be used to quantify fluorescence?
Yes, it's a scientific camera that provides proper linear performance and can be used to quantify your fluorescent signals.
How does the 95B compare with the OrcaFlash 4.0 in terms of, first, absolute imaging area, and second, maximum frame rate, and third, sensitivity at low light levels? You want me to separate that out. So how does the 95B compare with the OrcaFlash 4.0, first in terms of absolute imaging area?
So the absolute imaging area is effectively the same. I believe that the 2K by 2K CMOS sensor has a diagonal of about 18.7 millimeters. The Prime 95B sensor has a diagonal of 18.66, effectively the same. So you get the same field of view out of the sensor.
So then how does the 95B compare with OrcaFlash 4.0 in terms of maximum frame rate?
So full frame, the OrcaFlash 4, the Photometrix Prime, or any of the front illuminated CMOS cameras are able to achieve 100 frames a second as the maximum full frame rate. The Prime 95B is able to achieve 81, 82 frames per second.
And then how does the 95B compare with OrcaFlash 4.0 in terms of sensitivity at low light levels?
As I'd shown in those images earlier in the stack, you're getting about a 3 times increase in sensitivity when you compare the front illuminated CMOS to the back illuminated CMOS, to the Prime 95B. You're getting an increase due to pixel size, and you're getting an increase due to the higher quantum efficiency as well. And that translates out to about 3.3 times more sensitive.
And lastly, how does it compare in terms of signal-to-noise ratio?
The signal-to-noise ratio for the 95B will be higher, because there's more signal measured per frame. And having more signal will always reduce the noise in your image by at least a factor of the square root of the signal. And so you will always get a significantly higher signal-to-noise ratio when comparing the two. If I jump back to this slide, what you can see is the red curve is the Prime 95B, and the 2 green curves along the bottom are the current front illuminated CMOS cameras, the light green being the 70% and the dark green being the 80% versions.
The most accurate way to compare the 95B to the Prime would be with equal effective pixel size, so 2 times 2 binning with the Prime. Under these conditions, which one has better signal-to-noise ratio, and how does it vary with light levels? And they also say the 95B has higher QY, but the Prime would benefit from binning at small pixels.
So yes, if you equate the pixel size between the two, you'll still have an advantage with the Prime 95B because of the quantum efficiency. And so the difference does become closer, but the 95B is still overall more sensitive. Even though you can have the equivalent pixel size effectively, the difference in conversion of available signal will always be higher with the back illuminated CMOS.
Can you explain how this camera is 3 times more sensitive than the current SCMOS technology with only about 12% increase in quantum efficiency? And when you consider the difference in pixel size that you did with the SCMOS versus the EMCCD comparison, what is the true gain? Sorry, that just jumped away from me. What is the true gain? The question just jumped away from me there. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay. So what you're actually getting is, if I do the quick calculation, so yeah, so you're getting about a 16% increase in sensitivity just due to the quantum efficiency. And so when you consider the difference in pixel size, what is the true gain in sensitivity? If I remember the math off the top of my head, I think you still end up being about 20 to 30% more sensitive with the 95B when you use a 60x magnification with the Prime 95. The other thing to consider is that the image quality that you're able to get with the 95B is actually much cleaner overall, and that will definitely play an effect as well.
Which SCMOS camera was used for comparison?
For the most part, the comparison was done versus the images were the images said which cameras were used. Some of the comparisons were done versus the 82% CMOS camera, and some of the comparisons were labeled prime were done with the 72% CMOS camera.
Is 100 FPS possible with denoising?
No. One of the issues that, or one of the trade-offs when any image processing algorithm is used is typically they tend to be quite information intensive, and so one of the trade-offs that you do have to make when doing denoising is that the frame rate is reduced.
How does the read noise compare to that of the Evolve 512?
So the read noise of the Evolve 512 without EM gain is about 50 to 70 electrons, but with EM gain you're able to reduce that effectively to less than 1 electron proportionally. And so the Prime 95B is able to get you a read noise of about 1.3 electrons. So quite close. While EMCCD cameras have the advantage in the raw read noise value, the CMOS technology offers read noise right around the levels of 1 electron.
Is it good for the in vivo imaging too?
Yes, why not? The sensitivity out into the near IR is better than the current CMOS technology out there, and is equivalent or slightly better than the EMCCD technology out there as well.
Now I'm going to just pause for a quick second because it looks like there's more questions coming in, and I just want to, let's see. I just want to see if we have time to answer a few more questions. Let's see. From which manufacturer did you use the cameras for the CMOS comparison?
While I don't want to explicitly say which manufacturer was used, we did use some of the 82% CMOS sensors, and we used our own Photometrics Prime for the 72% comparison.
What is the fastest frame rate possible with the denoising on?
About 17 frames per second is the fastest you can go with denoising.
That, and again, it looks like more questions coming in, so we'll just pause for a moment. Would you like to know if and when the denoising option will be available on the 95B?
When and if that feature is added to the camera, we will be sure to let everyone know.
Right, and again, more questions, so just give me a minute here. Do you have comparisons of images with and without denoising?
Yes, so if let me get to the slide. If we look at these images here, these are using the Photometrics Prime 72% CMOS camera. On the left is the undenoised image, and on the right is the denoised image. Same exposure time, same scaling.
Are you suggesting that we switch our EMCCD out for a BSI CMOS, and is it worth making the change? Did I ask you that one already? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think, is it worth switching it out? No, I think your EM camera will do you just fine. But as you move forward and look at future camera purchases, I think the 95B becomes the better solution.
Do you have images comparing the denoised EMCCD and denoised CMOS performance?
Yes. So if we look at this slide, on the left we have the EMCCD with no denoising compared to the SCMOS camera with denoising.
What is the maximum frame rate achievable for a small region of interest, for instance, 12 by 8?
I will have to get back to you on that one specifically.
And how about the longest exposure value for 95B?
Currently that is set to 10 seconds. Typically these cameras are used for much lower light flux, and exposure times range into the few hundreds of milliseconds at the most. By providing a max exposure time of 10 seconds, we're giving you, I think, a pretty decent range of flexibility there. If you want to expose for longer periods of time, you actually probably should be using CCD technology. They offer much lower dark current than CMOS technology and are better for long stare applications.
And let me know if this is answerable here. Are the signal-to-noise ratio versus photon flux curves corrected for pixel size?
So yes, pixel size is taken into account.
All right. So I would like to once again thank Rachit Mohindra for his presentation. Do you have any final comments for us today?
I think in general, as technology has progressed, everyone expected the back-illuminated CMOS to become a reality, and by having a camera that demonstrates this significantly improved performance over current CMOS technology, I think it's what many people have been waiting for, to take the advantage of CMOS technology and apply them to where EMCCDs had been used previously. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and hopefully it was good, useful information.
Thank you once again. I would also like to thank our sponsor, PHOTOMETRICS, for making today's educational webcast possible. This webinar has been approved for continuing educational credits. Please click on the CE button at the bottom left corner and follow the process to receive your credits. Before we go, I want to let everyone know that today's webcast will be available for on-demand viewing through December 14th, 2016. You'll receive an email from LabRoots letting you know when this webcast will be available for replay. Please share that announcement with your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. That's all for now. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.